This is a Dell Inspiron 5759 laptop. The complaint is you plug it in and it says adapter plugged in, not charging.
That's what it feels like when you're broke down.
It will run on a battery. It will run on the power supply adapter, but it will not charge the battery. Eventually the battery will discharge and you'll have to keep it plugged in order for it to operate. You can fix it by uninstalling the driver for the battery in the device manager, replace the battery, replace the charger. Sometimes doing that will correct the problem, but most of the time it's the signal from the power supply adapter to the laptop, called the power supply identification, that has gone bad, the power supply identification circuit. So on the Dell and HP use what's called a power supply identifier. So the outer jacket is your negative. The inside jacket of the power supply connector is 19 volts, and then there's a center pin. That center pin is your power supply identification. So if you look close, I don't know if you can see it, but inside there's a center pin, and that sends a signal to the laptop. If the BIOS doesn't see that signal, it will stop charging your battery. That tells the motherboard the wattage of your power supply, so it will properly charge your battery. This component happens to be an FDV30IN, and it's an SO23 mount, meaning it's a surface mount device, very small. I ordered some on Amazon. And they're very inexpensive. You can get 20 for $5. Very, very small. There's 20 of them in there. Okay, just to show you how small, there's the device I removed. Very tiny. Compare it to the tip of a ballpoint pen. That's the device. In order to solder this on, I recommend you use what's called an SMD workstation. It's got a very fine tip on the soldering iron, or you can use the heat gun to install it. I always recommend using some style of jeweler's lens or magnifying lens. I use these, that way I can see what I'm doing. You want to need some flux, some solder. Very, very tiny part. So let me go ahead and replace that part, and then we'll reassemble the motherboard and we'll see if it's charging. Okay, in order to diagnose this circuit, we're going to have to take some voltage measurements. This connector right here is the same connector here on the motherboard. The two red wires are your 19 volts power from the power supply. The black wires are your ground, and this brown wire here is the power supply identifier wire. Now on the schematic, you can see these two wires here. They come across. That's your 19 volts from the power supply. There's your grounds up here. And this is the brown wire, which is your power supply identifier. It travels to PQ6, which is that field effect transistor. They call it a MOSFET. It's an N-channel MOSFET. The MOSFET has a drain, a gate, and a source. If you look at it and think of it as a sink full of water, your drain is where the voltage or the water is going to drain into, and then it's going to go to the source. The source is what supplies the voltage to the identifier circuit. The gate is is the gate. If you open up the floodgate, the drain will drain to the source. So what we should have is 5 volts on the gate, which opens the gate, letting the 3.15 volts drain to the source. So when I took measurements on my board, which I'll do in a second, I had the 3.15 volts at the drain, I had the 5 volts at the gate, but the source was 0 volts, meaning that the gate was not opening, allowing the drain to the source. That makes sense. So we're going to go on the motherboard now, and we're going to take some measurements here at the drain, the gate, and the source to see what we have. We're also going to verify that we have 19 volts coming from the positive and negative of the power supply to the rest of the circuit. Okay, just a word of precaution: whenever you're working on MOSFET circuits or anything kind of computer circuits, you want to use a collar, and that what this does is this goes on your wrist, and then it connects to ground, and it grounds you for static discharge. So I'll hook that up and I'll put that to ground. What we're going to do is we're going to have a grounding clip. Clip that on the ground there. That clips to the negative side of my lead. Also, I will connect the end of the ground collar to the negative side. Okay, we're going to want to set our voltmeter on a scale. We're reading 19 volts, so you're going to be setting it on the 20 volt scale. Whatever your meter has, that will read from 0 to 20, 0 to 30, whatever, etc., etc. Then we were going to plug in, the power supply is lit and plugged in. We're going to then plug that into the adapter here. Then we're going to take the red lead and we're going to check our power. Here, okay, we got 19.69 volts. The second pin, 19.68. Our grounds are good, and then our identifier wire is the brown wire. On that pin we have our 3.15 volts. Okay. Now on the schematic, from that connector, this is our brown wire, and that's where we want to check voltage. That goes PQ6 to the drain. We're going to check the voltage at the drain. We're going to check the voltage at the gate and the source. The gate is what controls the drain to the source. So if we don't have voltage on the, I'm just going to go down. Here's PQ. Let me turn on. Let's see. Okay, so here, that's our drain. We have the 3.14 volts. The gate, we have our 5 volts. And the source, 0 volts. So that tells me that this MOSFET is open. The gate is not controlling the drain to source. So what we're going to do is we're going to replace, we're going to put a jumper from the drain to source, which I've already done. And when I put the jumper from the drain to source, I actually removed this whole part, and I put a jumper from drain to source and powered the motherboard up, and it started charging. The laptop was charging the battery. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace this part and install it on the motherboard, which I have already done. And now I will take a voltage at the source, and now I have my 3.15 volts after replacing PQ6. Motherboard put in, and what does it say? We got charging. Adapter 65 watts, health excellent, battery is at 55% and charging. All is good. So let's go back now and boot into Windows. and see what happens. Okay, it's plugged in at 58%, 45 minutes till fully charged, and it is charging. There we go. 45 minutes till full charge. And it's working. There you go. Okay, now we will reassemble the laptop.